Yo, what's up? It's your boy, Brother Ash. Welcome to Watch Worthy. The reason why I'm talking about that is because we have talking like that is because we have a very special episode.
I was wondering what was that.
That's about to be my new style of intro.
Okay, that's your 80s hip hop intro.
80s, 90s, all of that. Today we're gonna be talking about the documentary Welcome to Rap City.
Yes.
Gonna be definitely a favorite episode of mine. Y'all know I love me some hip hop. Self-explanatory if you've listened to any of the other episodes. So this documentary came out in 2023. It's a 3-part docuseries on BET, produced by Mass Appeal, which is a company that Nas is an investor in.
Yeah.
So Nas has been doing a bunch of work with this company already.
Yeah.
They already put stuff out. This doc feature interviews with Ludacris, Charlamagne, Eve, DJ Drama, Big Tigger, and more. Lots of more people in this doc. So dope stuff. I hope y'all get a chance to watch it. The reasons why we chose this doc, I'll dive into it. I remember being a young boy watching Rap City with my older brother. I thought it was super cool.
How old are you?
Look, man.
Probably shouldn't have been watching.
I remember seeing it as early as like 6, 7 years old, watching Rap City. And that's just what I remember. There's no telling how many times it was playing in the background. I had an older sibling.
Yeah.
So when we was getting babysat, that's what he was watching. So that's what we was watching. And
Yeah, so you're the youngest. I'm the oldest. I never really watched Rap City, I have to be honest. I was more of the 106 in Park era, and we'll definitely talk about that on this documentary as well, because they basically talked about like the history of BET as well. So I was not as I was familiar with Rap City. Like, of course, I know hip hop culture, but I didn't actually watch it when it was airing in the early 2000s, and that seems to be the golden era of Big Tigger. So we'll definitely get into it. But for me, I just wanted to dive in because I love documentaries about hip hop and learning more about our culture, and this was a great one.
This documentary reminds me that us millennials are getting old. Things that were cherished in our childhoods are now being talked about as
right. It's old enough to have a documentary now.
Like, this was a jewel of our culture 20 years ago. Certain eras of it, at least. So this is dope. That's why we were so excited to do it.
Yes.
So we're gonna remind you about our poll question before we get started.
Take that poll.
Which era of hip hop is the best era of hip hop? Do you
have an answer, or you want to answer at the end?
I guess we can answer at the end, or do you want to? What you want to do?
We'll see how the episode goes. If I'll keep my opinion to myself, but
all right. That's a tough question.
It really is, and so keep that in mind. If you're listening on Spotify, you can always interact with us and take the polls and our questions, because we want to hear from you guys. And I'm going to tell you how it all kicked off. Let's start with the 1989 launch of Rap City. So first of all, we're in 1980s, and if you're black, you know what that means for our community. It was the crack explosion during this time, Snowfall, but in real life, okay? And so people were coming off of Reaganomics. We're getting into the mid to late 80s, and there was also the murder of Yusef Hawkins at this time. There's a documentary about that, babe, that I have to show you. This was basically the Mike Brown of their time, another black kid who was killed by the hands of police in New York. So just think, you got crack going on, you got murder by the hands of cops, a lot going on in this cultural hub where hip hop is, and across the nation, all the LA riots, everything. That was the 90s, but we'll get there. So you have artists like LL Cool J, who I'm wearing today, KRS-One, Big Daddy Kane. They really ruled the hip hop scene. And this was like when music really actually spoke to your soul, they said in the documentary. Like when hip hop really, we had that lyricism, we had that feeling, that emotion, and they were talking about their everyday struggles, like we just said. And so a lot of people call it the golden era of hip hop. If you believe that, the 80s was the golden era, make sure you comment on our poll. But this was really defined by a certain lyricism at that time. And so it's the 80s, and there's not a lot of black people on TV or in the media at all, really. Like, they're still kind of shutting us out. And definitely nobody was covering hip hop, because I think we've seen on a couple other documentaries where people were like, "Oh, hip hop, like we didn't want to touch that," which is absolutely crazy. Like, now hip hop is everywhere. Hip hop is in sports, it's in marketing, it's everywhere. But back then it was the new kid on the block. People didn't want to, y'all are rapping over beats. Like, what is this? People were confused. And so this is really, they said in the documentary, rap was something you had to just listen to when your friends came back from New York City with a mixtape. It was still word of mouth. It wasn't all over the radio like it is today. And so they even said back then that radio shows were mostly like, they were mixing and they were DJing, but you didn't have what we have now, like people freestyling it in the booth and everything. And so during this time, a light bulb goes off. It always starts with one man's idea. Bob Johnson, he founded BET, Black Entertainment Television. And it was super niche. He wanted black people to be able to see themselves on TV. And we know now BET has been bought and traded and whatever else, and people say it's not black owned anymore. But never forget, Bob Johnson created BET. And so it was the first and only black cable network at that time. And they had about 10 million subscribers to start. So, you need a lot more than that nowadays, but that's what they started out with. And so they were headquartered in DC, and people were saying back then that DC was kind of like the first Atlanta. Like it was black professionals coming up
Chocolate
and like
City. Yes,
exactly. And so it was perfect for BET to be headquartered in DC for that reason. And so early BET, it's not what they have today with the BET Plus and everything else they got going on. They had a very shoestring budget. They had very little money. They played a lot of Earth, Wind, and Fire, Aretha Franklin. They played the oldies.
Classics.
Exactly. And so they did have a music program at that time that was airing on BET, but it wasn't Rap City. It was called Video Soul. And the senior producer of Video Soul, he was one of those old heads who was like, nah, I'm not playing hip hop. It's too street, he said. So they were really like,
You know what? And I hate
red flag? Is that a red flag?
Red flag. Because that's a problem for me when we say it's too street, when so much of our culture was embedded in those streets.
Yeah.
At the time, we may not have realized or wanted to acknowledge it because we wanted better. But there were also a lot of hardworking families and good people that was in those streets and that contributed to the culture. So I think that's why hip hop ended hitting the way it did, because people was able to relate to it. Whether it put you in a good mood, a bad mood, or it just made you want to have fun. You heard hip hop and it reminded you of somebody that you knew or somewhere you've been before.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be a red flag for me as well. Any black people who say hip hop is too hood for them, I don't know about that. So
especially back then, it really wasn't as bad as it is now.
Right. I'm like, you were mad about LL Cool J, you would be terrified at what they'd say today.
You couldn't fathom Lil Wayne.
So finally, they did try to experiment, and what happened was they played hip hop videos for a week straight, right before school started, like right during Labor Day weekend. And of course, that rap week that they had ended up being their most viewed week ever and their best week ever.
Wow.
And so they said, hey, let's turn this into a show, and they named it Rap City after, like a Rhapsody in music. So Rap City launched in 1989. And, it just goes to show that Rap City was born during a very tough environment, a very tough time in our community. And they said in the documentary, it's one of the things that we've been able to produce while living in hell. And I just think that is so cool because that's what black people do all day long. We make the best out of our situations, out of our circumstances. We, band together, just a couple black folks in DC, and they decided to put on a broadcast television show and bring hip hop to television.
I didn't even know Rap City was that old.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't even know that. I think I was surprised that BET was as old as it was, because a lot of old heads try to act like they ain't want nothing to do with BET, or they don't even know what BET was back in the day. But I guess that's because by the time we was kids, BET was primarily dedicated to shows like Rap City.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like it was a disconnect with the generations once they seen hip hop had become so popular.
Yeah.
So moving on, Rap City had a good start with early hosts like Chris Demare Thomas and Prince DeJour. I like Prince DeJour a lot.
Yeah, he was cool.
I like his personality.
I feel like Chris the Mayor, he was a little too comedic. And that's the thing. These people weren't like television hosts. They were all just starting out. So they would get like comedians or like...
And it was real...
So he was more comical.
It was real organic too, how a lot of these people got their starts. I was at the right place at the right time. Somebody called out sick and I took the opportunity to... say something, and I ended up having a job.
Or friends putting them on.
Yeah. So they were both Like I said, it was both in the docuseries, and the show took off once they had Will Smith as a guest, which is something else I didn't know. Like, I didn't know it went back that far. I know Will Smith was that boy back in the day. So charting artists and underground artists were all invited to the show. Rhapsody introduced artists like Jay-Z and Ludacris to the world. So all of our old heads and OGs got their start on Rap City.
I love that. They were putting on underground artists. They said like Ludacris owes his whole career to Rap City because nobody knew him before then.
Which is crazy. So MTV Raps came on 1 year after Rap City, which
red flag.
Red flag for that. I think that's extremely petty. Before that, we know MTV wasn't really playing none of our culture for real, or rap videos. I would say if you've seen black people on MTV, it was real commercial, maybe pop or like
maybe Michael Jackson.
You feel me?
If they felt like it,
but not a lot of black stories are being told. You know what I'm saying, about our culture and our experiences. So Rap City introduced artists like Jay-Z and Ludacris to the world. Rick James and David Bowie even spoke about how MTV wasn't really, putting on for the culture or anything like that. So in the early 90s, hip-hop is still looking for its identity. You've got the New York sound or the LA sound. So right now it's kind of like, this West Coast, East Coast thing going on. And that's like kind of what's dominating hip-hop. So one of the Rap City producers did a big push to let Big Les, the first and only female host, before BET finally signed off.
Yes, and if we could just pause right there, I just want to give a shout out to women in hip hop because we know that there weren't a lot of them at that time, and so for her to be on TV, that's always something that I wanted to do, like be a little TV personality. So for her to actually do it back then in the 90s, like hats off to Big Les, and she was in the documentary. So.
Word. Much love. And she was the only woman too, so she held it down, which is kind of a red flag.
I love our culture, but as we know in hip hop, women didn't get a lot of opportunities. What you were going to say about her looks was a red flag to me.
Yeah, so, she was real tall, she was demanding. Not like a demanding person, but like she had that type of presence where like, everybody knew her, everybody loved her. She was a dancer and a choreographer, but like because of that, nobody really knew her by name. They knew her as like the big girl that could dance. So Rap City gave her a voice, and she said in the docuseries, that women really do know hip hop. Women do know this culture.
Yeah.
So Rap City went through a few hosts, including Big Les's co-host Joe Claire, from 1994 to 1999.
So that's a red flag, I guess, because like they switch a host a lot, but at the same time, that's what happens when you have a new show. You're trying to figure things out. It's trial and error.
And I feel like sometimes they was a little bit too sensitive with like what the ratings is doing and what they not doing. Like,
well, that was important, babe. Like if they didn't get the ratings, they would have pulled the plug and there would be no Rap City.
I don't know. Like I felt like they was real quick pulling the trigger on like changing people's faces and stuff like. Instead of trying to like figure out what's work with people. But I guess that's showbiz. I don't know. So rap radio became a segment of the show where people could freestyle. So this is a huge thing. Like this is giving artists an opportunity to showcase their skills.
And I think what's really important about the early eras that I learned is that they were like really in the streets. It was like if me and you took a camera and we were in the streets.
Yeah.
So I love how they really kept it like within the community and they were like where the people were.
So, in the meantime, Yo MTV Raps ended in 1995.
Guess they didn't last very long.
But, I mean, maybe because a lot of people on MTV wasn't really feeling it because they probably felt like it was a shake off of what they was already doing at BET. But Rap City was still standing. So, the hip-hop marketing was selling at all types of products at this time.
Yeah.
So, now you're starting to see hip-hop on the screen with, like, Fresh Prince, Juice, Belly. You're starting to see rappers in movies.
Mm-hmm.
Music videos gave artists opportunities to express themselves in all different type of ways in the media. So the show originally shot everything in DC, but then they started traveling, going to different cities, and the crew was growing and learning together. Everything was still trial and error though. So like they doing a lot of things and not really seeing it work out as much. Things can go wrong when you doing something like this for the first time.
But I love also how we're starting. It's like the show is growing with hip hop because hip hop, like we said earlier, people are like, oh, what's that? And now it's getting big. It's in the marketing. It's in McDonald's commercials. It's in Sprite commercials. So now they have more to play with. Like now they can have more guests and make the show bigger and better. And like you said, travel the country because I feel all I knew was East Coast hip hop. Like, being from the East Coast, My dad to this day isn't a big West Coast fan, but you know, I feel like now they were able to branch out from DC and go across the country, so that was really cool.
And that's for me. I always listened to all different type of rap because it was accessible to me. Like I knew about Snoop when I was a kid. Some of my rappers, like favorite rappers, grew up from all over different parts of the country. But your dad era, like they was real like territorial with who they was listening to. You had Eric Watson as a producer and Greg Diggs as a director of programming. And they really like decided like what videos was going to be shown.
Yeah.
They really had their hand on the culture. And very, very significant role that they played in this because they really decided ultimately what people would see.
And I think that's so important because we know that sometimes the big wigs or the people who are controlling things behind the scenes aren't from the culture. Maybe they aren't a black producer or a black director, and so you have people who like come in and change things, and since they were like had their finger on the pulse, they knew what people wanted to see. So that was really cool to see them in the documentary.
So now we're getting into the late 90s, an ugly period in hip hop culture with the East Coast, West Coast beef. This is when they start having, you know, the whole back and forths and all that.
Yeah.
And in 1997, host Joe Clair got Biggie's last TV interview the day before he was shot. So like that was crazy. Cause you know, they, as you know, being Rap City during that time, I'm sure they were in between a lot of it, you know, working with different artists. They're traveling now.
Yeah, I guess that's a red flag to me because, like, sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, go ahead.
That's a red flag to me because I feel like, why did people let that carry on for so much? The East Coast versus West Coast. Like, I feel like it just kind of started out as like a, you know, PR thing, but people took it too far. People literally died over it.
Well, that's because a lot of these rappers was real, like, street niggas.
They were real street niggas.
Like, now, when rappers beef, it has become more of a gimmick because rap beefs are gimmicks.
Yeah, Twitter fingers.
People make money from them. People gain publicity from them. But like back in the day, if you got on the track and said "fuck you" and "fuck the whole side of the country that you live on," niggas took that very personal.
Don't one of you niggas got sickle cell or something?
Nah, for real though. Like it was violent back then.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that Rap City got Biggie's like last TV interview, that just goes to show how ingrained the show was in the culture. Like, people would come to Rap City and feel like, oh, I'm home, you know? Like, yeah. I don't know if there's anything like maybe Hot Ones or something that people go to now where they're like, I love it here. And so now we're in the 2000s already. So Rap City was really around for a long time. We're in the 2000s, and as we go into this era, BET was trying its best to censor out guns, drugs, titties, like...
basically hip-hop.
Yeah. It's hard to do, but that's what people were fighting for. You know, parents and the church advocates and stuff, they didn't want kids to see this on TV, but there's not much they can do. Like, that's a red flag. Anybody who's, like, down with hip-hop because of the titties and the guns, your kids just shouldn't listen to it. I'm sorry, but I don't know how else to censor that. And so BET was trying to do their best to play these clean videos, but these groups are still trying to take them down. And somebody said in the documentary, like, if these advocates had just stopped and actually watched the interviews in between the music videos with the artists, got to know them as people. They had a nice clip of a Method Man interview where he was like talking about his children or whatever. Like, these are real human beings and they're not just gangsters.
What's crazy to me is that people always say, like, be coming at hip hop for being as explicit as it is. But it's one thing that also, you know, because it's not realistic you can control everything your kids see or talk about when they go to school. But you should be instilling in your kids that that's a artist or that's a rapper or most importantly, that's an adult. He could drink and have fun and party in the videos, but that's not appropriate for a child. Like, it's a time and place for everything. And I think sometimes people was too harsh towards hip hop because how explicit it was. Like, nah, it's not for everybody. But the people that it's for, it's supposed to like really, you know, relate to them. So
I mean, even today, sometimes it's a little too much titty, pussy, this and that. But
it definitely has gotten
out of control. But that's the thing. I'm not letting my child listen to Sexy Red if I had a child. Like that's your child and that's your responsibility. Like you said, it's not BET's responsibility. But they were at least trying. And so the next host, you know, this will be the one that us millennials will come to get to know. Everybody loves Big Tigger. Tigger went to UMD, and he said that his freshman year of college, I'm going to host Rap City one day. I love how in these documentaries, everybody just proclaims it, and it became so. And so he started doing voiceovers for another little teen show that they had at BET called Teen Summit. And from there, he became the host. And so that was like him getting his leg in. And he kind of had like a radio personality. He had like worked at a radio station before. And so he had that background. And people said that Tigger was super aggy about getting a job at the radio station. Like one of those people, like you said, sometimes you just gotta annoy the right people. He beat it over their heads every day. Like, y'all hiring yet? Can I get a job yet? And apparently it worked. And so he was finally elevated to do the hip hop news. And so he was getting all this experience as a kid in the 2000s in college. And so one day, like Brother Ash said, somebody just happened to be sick. And folks, you know, they decided to give him a chance. Specifically, one of the former producers, Melanie Massey, I want to shout her out. She gave Tigger his shot on Rap City. And that's how it really all got started. You fill in for somebody and they say, hey, we actually like you, so why don't you stick around? That's awesome. That's a blessing. And so, like I said, he was a radio personality, so him as a host really worked well. People really loved him. They said that he had a unique voice, a different style of dress, everything, and he wasn't afraid to be himself. And I think that is so important, especially when you're on television. People may try to change you. Like you said, it was kind of a red flag how they kept going through different hosts, trying to find the right personality. Oh, you're too big, you're too small, you're not funny enough, whatever. It can kind of take a hit on your personality, but Tigger really had that confidence.
Tigger was that boy. Yeah. I think that's, watching this documentary, I seen a lot of familiar faces, but I was so young at the time, like, I just always thought everybody was, was celebrities and was cool.
Yeah.
But, like, I remember, like, Tigger and him holding it down for a long time. I feel like he might have been the longest tenured host on the joint. So yeah,
a lot of these hosts, we mentioned the years, and they were only there for like a short stint. And so Tigger said in the docuseries, like he still to this day thinks this was like such a blessing for him and his career. He said being on such an iconic channel, an iconic show was amazing.
And Tigger had bars.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to that in a second because they were scared to see him in the booth. And so this is a red flag for me. Of course, enter somebody new. We got our little BET family going on in DC. We're having a good time. Like, we're all great coworkers. Everybody, we're doing amazing. Enter Stephen Hill. I don't want to say he's a red flag, but it's just like as soon as corporate gets their hands on things, then it just changes.
Fuck everything.
Yeah. So Stephen Hill joined BET from MTV, and he was going to be doing the programming and the development, and he did that for like 17 years, from 99 to 2017. And so Hill programmed BET like a radio station, they said. But this isn't a radio station. This is a TV station. You have to do it differently.
Yeah.
He brought in a different point of view because basically everybody, like I said, was working in a silo. You know how you get comfortable. Oh, this the Rap City way. We all been here since the beginning. This how we gonna keep it. He was like, nah, we gonna shake it up a little bit. So first, he changed the format of the show by cutting it down from 3 hosts to 1.
Wow.
So they got rid of Big Les, got rid of Joe Claire, and it was only Tigger. Which, in hindsight, is probably a good idea. You don't need 3 people. But it just sucks because people lost their job because they had to come in and change things. And so then they also changed the scenery. Remember I said they were out on the street, talking to people, freestyling on the street. He took that away. I guess that was too hood. And he decided to have the scene be the basement that we have come to know and love, where Tigger did the show from. And the whole premise was like he was living in his mom's basement or whatever. And so the basement, which is BASS, basement, that was an idea that was brought by director Craig Henry. So just a lot of smart, talented black people in the room, giving cool ideas, really, putting the show together. And a fun fact we learned from the documentary was that the basement was not actually a basement. It was an elevated studio set, which really tripped out guests when they came to the show, because the hip-hop artists who came on the show also watched the show just like us.
Yeah.
And they loved Rap City. They couldn't wait to come on the show and talk to Tigger. It was like that moment in your career, like, oh, I made it to Rap City. So imagine you're going on set and you're like, oh.
You gotta go upstairs and shit.
Like, this isn't a basement. It's a bunch of cameras around us and an open set. And so the Basement 2000s era is really the best era in our opinion. That was the Tigger era. And it introduced us to DJs like DJ Khaled, DJ Drama. Because what I loved about the format of the show was Tigger was like the host, but then he had a DJ. And they would switch out the DJ. They would give new DJs a guest star appearance like Khaled and Drama. And so that was good PR for DJs, because remember at this time, no social media, still the early 2000s. So this was a great way for not only rappers to get out there, but DJs as well. And this is right at the hip hop of the commercial climax, of hip hop. And this is really where Rap City was still giving artists a human voice. Cause as I said, they're out here in McDonald's commercials now and NFL commercials and everything like that. But they were still humanized when they came to the set of Rap City. So the freestyle segment did change and it became the booth. And this is really where rappers were able to raise their fan base by doing these freestyles like Nas, Cameron, Killer Mike. They all came through.
Everybody.
Yes. If you didn't have a Rap City freestyle, like who are you? You got to get on Rap City.
And that's what I love about Rap City. It touched on all the elements of hip hop.
Yeah.
DJing, graffiti, breaking, MCing, you know what I'm saying? Like, all of these things were a part of the show some way, somehow.
Right.
So,
the fashion.
Yeah, and to have that bloom from such like a dark period for our people, and then everything that was going on with the East and West, like it really was a safe space for artists to come and show their talent.
Yeah.
So.
And so the best part, of course, was that Tigger could actually rap. Some of the other hosts, like I said, they were comedians or they were DJs, so they really couldn't hold their weight in the booth with the artist. So it was cool as a viewer because now you get to see the host kind of jump in there with the artist, and it just added a whole nother vibe to the show. And they said that at one point it was hard for them to book talent for the show because niggas was scared to see Tigger in the booth.
You couldn't come to the show and not be able to rap.
Yeah, if you flopped,
you didn't have some shit in your head memorized that you could come with, or you couldn't freestyle, Tigger was going to out rap you as the host. Like
they showed, he would really hang with anybody. They showed that episode with Beanie Man and how he could just even jump in the Jamaican vibe. Like it was dope. So that was really awesome to see him just kind of reminiscing about that in the documentary. And so when Stephen Hill changed things up, okay, new format, whatever. But what really shook the culture at BET was when they moved from DC to NYC. They said that they just wanted to go where the music market is. It's either LA or New York. So I mean, that's crazy because now today we have so many awesome DMV artists, right? Like Wale comes to mind. Just like even some of your friends, people who you fuck with, there's great sound coming out of the DMV area. But at the time, back then, all the commotion was in New York. So they said, we got to move. And so this was a tough transition that affected a lot of the employees. Imagine if you're fucking with your job, your commute's 15 minutes, you live in DC, you vibe in DC, and now they're like, oh, we're moving to New York City.
You think Rap City was paying everybody to relocate?
Nope, definitely not. So they probably lost a lot of employees, and it was probably very hard. Damn. In fact, they talked about how hard it was in the documentary. And so they were just not as creative when they were in New York. They couldn't be themselves. The golden DC days were really over for them. And so the show lost its DC personality, and Tigger said, we knew it wasn't ours anymore.
Yeah, they saying stuff like, the building wasn't like, it just felt like a corporate switch. Like the other building in DC, it was theirs.
The big black BT.
Yeah, they said it was like a big black BT building. Whereas like this new building was just like kind of like, a little dingy looking.
Another skyscraper.
Yeah, skyscraper. And, had to get, people make New York seem like glamorous, like the city of, dreams happen here. And it is. But like, for them, it was like, oh, like this is kind of like unfamiliar territory. So it was something they had to adjust to.
It seemed like they were trying to make BET into MTV. So that's a red flag.
Red flag for sure.
As you said, other people in the docuseries said we became very mainstream. It was more corporate. It was union. Penny McDonald, she was kind of a stuffy black lady, no shade, but I'm glad that she was in the documentary as well because she could give her point of view. Everybody has a job to do. She may not have wanted to, stifle their creativity, but they told her, quote, my job was to elevate Rap City to quality TV. Yeah. So it's not that Rap City wasn't great before, but they had to elevate it to a new market now. And we know how hard it is to keep consumers engaged for years after years. Shows get cut after 3 seasons.
I'll give Penny her props because I think she was even Big Tigger had said, like, she used to be on him about shit. Yeah. But he realized that he learned a lot from her being on him and her being so tedious about things. You need that one tedious sister. The annoying tedious sister.
They said that they hated each other low-key.
Yeah, put her glasses up like that.
So tell us more about after that.
So the post Big Tigger era, every good thing gotta come to an end.
Yeah.
Couldn't happen forever. So also in 2000, Stephen Hill, the president of music programming, created 106 in Park.
And that's where it all went downhill.
And this is crazy to me because like I always seen it like, all right, like I'll be watching Rap City with my big brother, and then boom, 106 in Park come on. So like
that golden era where for a brief moment they were still both
like,
airing.
Internally, it wasn't quite golden for them.
Yeah.
So the show was like the shiny new thing at the office.